With that, I'd like to introduce our two participants. Speaking for the Plaza Initiative is Patrick Smith. Patrick has been involved on the Plaza Committee since 2015. He's a fourth-generation farmer in our valley, directly connected with Loftus Ranch's Balebreaker, Yakima Chief Hops, and Olympia Fruit. His wife Colleen and his two children, Carolyn and Luke, live in the area, and he will be speaking on the pro-Plaza side. I give you Patrick Smith. Patrick, come on up, please. Speaking on behalf of those that do have some concerns about the Plaza is Mr. Bruce Smith. Bruce is born and raised here in Yakima, a graduate of Gonzaga University with a degree in journalism and political science. That's a word stemming from the Greek term poly, meaning many, and tick, meaning blood-sucking parasite. And, but we better know him as the owner of Yakima Valley Publishing, which publishes the Business Times and the Central Washington Senior Times. He's chaired numerous local and regional boards and was also elected to the East Valley School District Board once upon a time. He's married with 4 children and 3 grandchildren, and I know he loves his community very much. Mr. Bruce Smith. I suspect the two are only related well back in the genetic strain, but they claim to know each other pretty well. So we're going to open up with 4 minutes of opening comments. There was a coin flip, so defending this goal and starting today's show is going to be Mr. Patrick Smith. Pat?
Thank you. Give a moment to get the, oh, it's on my clicker, all right. Well. All right, good afternoon. Oh, this is a little low. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I'd like to start with an area where I think we all agree. The process in getting to this point has been fraught with mistakes. Unfortunately, we can't go back in time and fix that flawed process. We can only look to the future and for solutions for improving the quality of life in Yakima. The Plaza was never intended to be the end. The Plaza is the beginning. The Plaza is just one project inside a long-term master plan for downtown Yakima. A plan that transforms downtown into a vibrant, exciting environment for all Yakima residents and visitors. At the heart of this larger vision is a world-class public space. If we look at human history and how we design the places we live, a common thread emerges. With the exception of a 50-year-long failed experiment in the late 20th century, people designed cities putting people first. In the mid-1940s, we threw out that formula and began designing our cities to put the automobile first. We replaced places for people with parking lots for cars. Much of what exists in downtown Yakima today was redeveloped in this 50-year period. What Yakima has learned in the last 20 years is the same thing that cities everywhere learned. A city that puts the automobile first doesn't work. I just returned from 8 days in Europe, 3 of which were spent in Amsterdam. Few cities are more hostile to automobiles than Amsterdam. Canals, bikes, pedestrians, everything about central Amsterdam is anti-automobile. But the narrow streets are full of people and the shops are busy. Amsterdam doesn't need a downtown revitalization plan because its center is alive and vibrant all hours of the day. Yakima's not Amsterdam, but I saw firsthand the power of public spaces to attract people. Public spaces are critical to a city's identity. Yakima, sadly, does not have a signature place where we gather. Great public spaces bring people from all walks of life. Here they interact, build relationships, foster community pride and common understanding. The 4 most visited places on earth are a public market, a plaza, a square, and a park. It's in our very nature to gather in public places. This project is about transforming our downtown and making our city a more livable, inviting place for people. Businesses and jobs increasingly want to locate in regions with high livability. Livable cities are walkable, sustainable, and have great public spaces. To transform Yakima, we have to be willing to abandon our default response to say no to everything and have the courage to say yes once. The investment made in this project by residents and businesses is unprecedented in our city's history. The substantial contributions made by donors have made this project a bargain for the city. The city has the opportunity to structure the bonds such that the first 5 years of debt service can be covered entirely by donations. Not a single cent would come out of the city's budget until the plaza was in its 6th year of operation, and additional tax revenues from development and economic activity are rolling in.
1 minute.
Other financing options exist that would allow more flexibility and opportunities for additional revenue generation. Finally, this is an issue of public trust. The City Council set forth the conditions by which the plaza would be built. All of the conditions were met and then some. What does it say to the community and future potential investors in our community that the word of the Yakima City Council is not its bond? This is exactly the type of public-private partnership that can transform a city, and we will need more of these types of partnerships as we develop other opportunities around our region. Vote yes on this project. Vote yes to tell City Council that they need to live up to their commitment. And vote yes because all of Yakima's residents deserve a world-class public space to meet, gather, and play. Thank you.
All right, very good. All right, Bruce, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Well, thank you very much, Downtown Rotary, for hosting this discussion. This is a very important topic. Thanks also to Doug Rich. Doug's been arranging this forum for a couple of weeks now, negotiating details with Patrick and myself. I think I was pretty easy to deal with. The only thing I insisted on was a stool, because I'm too old and too big to stand here for an hour. Thanks also, of course, to Patrick. I've known Patrick Smith and his family for more than 20 years. For those of you who don't know, Patrick inherited his mother's looks and his father's intelligence, which is the best of both worlds. I also want to give a shout out to the people on both sides of this argument who are doing what they think is right and fair and best for Yakima. Our argument is with the proposed downtown plaza, not with the people behind it. We're supposed to use our opening statements to outline our arguments, so here they are. 1, the plaza unfairly takes away needed parking that was paid for by nearby property owners. 2, it won't work as promised. And 3, taxpayers can't afford to borrow millions of dollars to build it, and we can't afford to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to maintain it. Let's look at the parking. No matter what anyone says, the plaza will reduce immediate parking, and it will do so significantly. Immediate parking may not be critical in places like downtown Seattle, but it's very critical in places like downtown Yakima. And replacing with parking that is a block or 2 away does not solve the problem. We also believe it is morally wrong to take a parking lot away from the people who paid for it, which is precisely what this is doing. We also think it's illegal. Now let's talk about the likelihood the plaza will deliver on its promises. First off, we believe the downtown is growing and prospering right now without a plaza. Buildings are sprouting up and succeeding without a plaza. Concerts and other special events are drawing crowds downtown without a plaza. The downtown even has its own association, largely funded with taxpayer dollars, whose sole mission is to promote the area. We don't think the downtown needs a game changer. And even if it did, we don't think the plaza is it. We don't think the plaza, especially the revised and scaled down version that is now on the table, will deliver what has been promised. Could we be wrong? Sure. But, and this is very important, we're not willing to gamble our parking lot on it.
1 minute.
Our last argument, we don't think taxpayers need to borrow and repay $3 to $5 million to fund the plaza. Somewhere north of $1.5 million in taxpayer money has already been spent. We call that a sunk cost, lost money. We think it would be foolish to borrow $1.5 million to repay the money we've already spent and then borrow an additional $1.5 to $3.5 to finish the project. We don't think taxpayers should get stuck paying for the maintenance and operation of a plaza, a figure that even the city concedes will be $200,000 a year, and we think will be at least twice that. By the way, the city recently asked anyone who was interested in managing the project to come forward. No one did. And there's a reason for that. The plaza simply can't operate without significant public subsidy. Again, thanks, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Bruce. At this point, each side will have a 1 minute to rebut comments that were made. Patrick, you first.
Okay, I'd like to start with the funding of the current parking lot. That assessment was not paid by property owners. It was paid by employers downtown. Of the top 5 financial contributors to that assessment, 4 are no longer in downtown. The parking did not save those department stores. They're now gone. The only one left is the Herald Republic of the top 5. Was never attached to property ownership. Regarding that it won't work, as I mentioned in my comments, the 4 most visited places on earth are public spaces. We know that public space will attract people. And as far as that we can't afford it, the project, the construction cost is nearly 90% funded by private donations. The public contribution is a small piece of the construction cost and will lead to greater development downtown, which in turn brings tax dollars to the city. And with the way that the city can structure the bonds, pushing any city contribution out at least 5 years, we have time for that development to occur. So while downtown has seen tremendous redevelopment in the past few years, much of that has happened since the Plaza project began rolling. Killing the project now would be slamming the brakes on progress that is only starting to take hold. We still have a lot of vacancy downtown, and we need to continue to invest in downtown and attract people.
Okay, that was 1:30, and you have 1:30 as well. Bruce?
Oh, I don't know that I'll need it.
Okay.
Listen, this stuff was financed in the 70s. For almost 10 years, I was involved with the Downtown Area Redevelopment Committee, and we managed this. The parking lot was entirely funded by property owners. There were 2 revenue streams. One was an LID, which is paid for exclusively by property owners, and the other was a PBIA that was a business license tax. The parking lot, the construction of the parking lots were paid entirely by the LID. Now, why did they do that? They did that because it enhanced the value of their property. So whether they own the property today or not is irrelevant. The person who bought the property because there was a parking lot across the street that they can rely on. And that parking lot was put there by the person they bought the property from. You want to talk about reneging on deals? Let's talk about making a commitment to those property owners, and then years later down the road, when you've got a better idea, taking that parking lot away from them and using it for something else.
Okay, thank you very much. I did ask the membership earlier to submit questions in advance, and we did see a couple of themes advance, so I think I would ask these 3 questions, and then we will open up the floor to comments as well. And let's try to limit our responses as much as we can to 30 seconds. First question, why does the existing art in front of the Capitol Theater have to be taken out with the new plaza? We'll start with Patrick.
And this is just, to the best of my knowledge, that art will be reincorporated into the plaza. So it's not being removed, it's being incorporated to the alley, which would be on the north side of the plaza next to like the Sports Center, Olive Garden, Cowichan Canyon. Thanks.
Anything to add to that, Bruce?
I don't know.
Okay, all righty.
What do you want me to say? I don't know.
That took 30 seconds? Wow. Would the plaza be a good idea in a different location, assuming both sides agree to a different location? Bruce?
Well, sure. I mean, our biggest objection is to where it is, and that and clearly to the impact on the parking. The problem is you can't accomplish what they want to accomplish moving it somewhere else.
Patrick?
I think actually Plaza opponent Bill Lover said it best way back when the different options were being discussed, and Bill said that if we're going to build a plaza, we should build it on that lot. So okay. That's all I have to say.
All righty. And this, I think I'm asking for a little bit of an expanse on what you had both spoken to earlier. We had a discussion about who originally paid for the parking lot. When did the payments cease, and when would be a reasonable time after that for a city council to determine a change of use? And I guess I'll start with Patrick on that.
To the best of my knowledge, and if John Ball is in the crowd, John Ball is much more of an expert on this than I am, but there's John over there. To my knowledge, the payments ceased about 20 years ago. John, do you have anything to add to that?
I can't tell you exactly. I think Cliff Moore's here also, but the payments, the RCW was passed in 1974, the end of 1974. The assessments were on business owners that if you had 1 to 5 business owners, you paid $20 a year per employee. So it's pretty small. If you have more than that, you paid $40 a year. Service businesses were half that. There probably was some funds that came from business licenses, but the bulk of the bond, which was pretty small by our standards, although if you inflate it, is on that assessment. And again, as Patrick said, most of those business owners, and probably to a large deal, a lot of the property owners are no longer downtown either. So
do you recall when
things
it ceased?
have changed? I think it was a 20-year bond. Is that correct, Cliff? Or I think Cliff's here somewhere.
Here to listen.
Yeah, but no, this is
smart move, Cliff. Smart move.
I'm just asking for time. I'm pretty sure it ended in the 90s because I was on the committee for downtown Yakima, and it had ended by that time, and that's when the new assessments and whatnot came onto place that now property owners pay.
Thank you, John.
Goes to it.
Very informative. And was there any discussion or discovery as or experience about a reasonable time after that bond was paid where a city council could make a change?
Is that for me or
sure.
Anybody in the audience? Or listen, the legislation passed in '74. It was not a per head rate. It was a property tax, and it was a percentage. It was a tax, just like all local improvement districts are, and many people in this room have experience with local improvement districts. It was a property tax that was assessed onto your property and paid into the fund that eventually paid off the debt. I think it was a 30-year bond. The point is, it was paid off years ago. So if the premise is it's paid off, therefore it's free game, those of you in the building who own your own house, think about what that means. That means once you pay it off, it's not yours anymore. Now, the legal question is an interesting legal question and is unsettled. And why is it unsettled? Because never before in the history of Yakima, or in the history of the state of Washington, has this happened. Never before have people through an LID, constructed something that had a single use, and then the governing body tried to convert the use to something different in the face of opposition from those people. There is no case law on it, so it's an open question exactly how that would be settled.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to open it up to the floor for questions. Again, I ask you, please keep your comments to a question to discover more about the issues. We have Bob, we have Rich, and then we have Kelly over here on this end. So raise your hand if you have some questions, and they will get a mic to you so we can respond. We have one right here.
Me? Is this on?
It is.
Okay, so I really appreciate the fact that you've gone to Europe and that you've seen this sort of revitalization, but so have I, so have most of the people in this room. I'm not totally against a plaza, but I'm really concerned about the fact that A, it's so little and it's going to be a park and you're spending millions of dollars on it, and B, I'm concerned, truly concerned about the impact that it has on the businesses surrounding that little square, because I think the impact is going to be huge.
Patrick, please speak to that.
I think the impact's going to be huge too. I think it's going to be a tremendously positive impact. How many people in here today would not have walked from the old Baptist church here? That was too far for you to walk?
I wouldn't have.
I'm seeing 2-3 hands. 2-3 hands in this whole group. That's the distance that, not even the incremental distance, the complete distance that you would have to walk to get to the businesses directly adjacent to the plaza. It's not that big of an ask to get out to walk. Cities that are more walkable have better health outcomes.
Anything to add to that, Bruce?
Well, you're certainly going to be healthier if you walk a lot. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. Any business that doesn't think upfront curbside parking in Yakima, Washington is an advantage, I guess I would just say I'd be stunned. There's a reason this is being driven, and our argument and our legal case is being financed by businesses who abut it. You can talk all you want about how people are going to walk 2 blocks. The reality is a lot of people are not. They're just going to go somewhere else, and we all know it.
I saw a hand over here earlier.
Thank you both for being here today. I think the premise of economic development is often lost in this conversation. So I'd like to just ask the question, if you could walk through the Wilson Building proposal. So the Wilson Building is valued at roughly $300,000 right now. And we can say the city of Yakima benefits from property taxes on that basis, which is, let's say, 1%. It's not, it's more than that. And let's say we buy that building and we put $2 million in it, and then the city of Yakima benefits off of what basis? $2 million? So that's the constructive argument for economic development in terms of property development. Is there anything else to do with economic development that we could cover today?
Where are we?
Well, I'm not making that argument. I think that it's growing naturally. You can't really say it's growing organically because the area is already heavily subsidized and supported by taxpayers. But there's a natural growth going on down there right now. I guess if I wanted to discuss that point, I would say that you're also going to have a subsequent drop-off. And there, as far as I can see, there's no economic development impact statements. There's a lot of talk, but I haven't seen an economic development impact statement. I've asked the city, they don't have any. It's all just talk.
Patrick?
On the Plaza website, we do have examples of other cities that have undertaken similar projects and the amount of development that they've seen. It's pretty well established that property values near public spaces are higher. The highest property values in New York City are near Bryant Park, Central Park, Prospect Park, Riverside Park. Minneapolis, the highest property values are along the park and trail system going through Minneapolis. Property values will increase. Developers will flock there because that's where people are. People go to public spaces. That's where people are. That's where developers want to be, is where the people are. And if your business is not good enough to walk 700 feet to, you're not going to survive regardless of how much parking is at your doorstep.
And I think I saw a hand here with Ken, so here we go.
Yeah, Bruce, you and your team have obviously spent a lot of time and effort and money shooting down this project. So my question is, being part of this community like you have, and your kids are here and all that, did you give any time or thought process to improving the community and options to this plaza, to move forward and help Yakima downtown and the community as a whole?
Well, yeah, I don't see the correlation between the two, but if your question is, have I done a lot to help the community? Yeah, I think I have. And for example, when I was involved with the Downtown Association, which I was for years, and I chaired the group, Joe Moyer and I, for example, who disagree strongly on this, we worked hard together on accomplishing a lot of things. My friend Joe Mann, sitting behind you, he started the farmers market because I appointed him to start the farmers market, and I funded him to start the farmers market. Now, Joe did all the work, which is kind of my style, but but we got it done. I've got a lot of bona fides. This isn't an argument about me. It's an argument about, is this a good idea or isn't it?
Anything to add, Pat? Okay, we have a question over here. Jim?
Yes, thank you. My question is directed at Mr. Bruce Smith.
Hi, Jim.
Bruce, in your opening comments, you were drawing a distinction, I think, between what you called critical parking and then other parking, which I think you defined as a block or two away. And in the course of that, you said that the lack of critical parking works fine in Seattle, but it doesn't or it won't work in Yakima. Could you explain why?
Well, I think Seattle as a community is used to walking to wherever they go, Jim, and that's why I said that. When you've got downtown areas with heavy concentrations of people, and frankly no parking, there's a culture there of walking to where you're going. So you just know you're going to walk 2 blocks to go to this meeting, Jim, and you just know you're going to walk 2 blocks to go to a restaurant. That's not Yakima's culture. And you can say it is, but it isn't. And if people go there, I mean, how many people in this room know somebody that goes and circles the parking lot twice and then goes somewhere else? I mean, that's really what we're dealing with. Now, you can complain about it. You can say it's unhealthy. You can say you can force them to do something else, but you can't. What you're going to force them to do is go somewhere else where they can park conveniently.
Anything to add with that, Pat?
I mean, I guess I would just add that that one of the pictures that you saw on my slideshow was what was on that lot before, and it was a hotel. Right? And what you have in Seattle is you have density. You have areas for people to go. And people and cars don't mix well. People don't like walking through surface parking lots. And a free surface parking lot is about as low a value of use of land as possible. The city of Yakima is subsidizing the businesses, the employees, and everybody in that area by providing free parking. If we truly have a scarce resource, which Bruce makes that argument that parking is scarce, let's charge for it. That's economics 101. If you have a scarce resource, charge for it. We're subsidizing people to park for free, and people and cars don't mix. You don't want to walk through a parking lot. You don't want to walk across a busy street. Let's reduce car traffic in Yakima, in downtown, and increase people traffic.
We've got a question in the back. I'm not sure where Dana stands on this issue, but she has a question.
No. So, who owns that parking lot?
The city of Yakima.
Yeah, the city owns it.
Okay, so as the owner of the property, are they not entitled to decide the use of the property? If I'm following on the analogy you talked about, as a homeowner, when I pay my mortgage and I own my property, I can decide to level it or do whatever I want to with it, no matter where I got the funding or the bank that paid for it, right?
Well, that's right, yeah. I mean, your overall question, that's exactly the question, and that's the issue. That because the city legally owns it because it was funded with an LID, not anything else, it was funded with an LID, that government, only government has the right to impose those, that the city owns it. Now, the question is can you in good faith impose an LID on people, promising them you're going to do something with it, and then change your mind after it's paid off? And that's an unsettled question.
Add to that?
The LID was actually a PBIA, Parking and Business Improvement Area, that was dissolved in 2008. So, I mean, as far as I know, there's no more legal basis for any ownership or use of that property outside of City Hall. City Hall, from what I understand, is able to do whatever they want with it and could pass an ordinance to make that clear and essentially reverse the 1973-74 ordinances, and the legal argument goes away at that point.
Okay, we have a question in front and then 2 in the back, and I think we'll be wrapped up, so right up front first.
One of the things that's happened that's unique about this is the amount of private equity that's been brought into this type of project, and I'd like to just give both sides the opportunity to speak to how important that is or isn't in regards to the role of the project itself and what impact that makes.
Far away.
Yeah, I mean, it's tremendous. I was on the fundraising committee, and when we were sitting maybe in this room, and city council said, no, it's not 7 million, it's 9. I'll tell you what, I thought that there was no way we were going to get there. We got there and some. So the support from the community has taken this from a 50-50 construction to a 90-10 construction. The city is getting a bargain. They're getting a $11 million asset for $1.3 million. I mean, anybody would take that deal. I think it's tremendous. I think that it shows a lot of leadership from the donor base in thinking about a future for our city that is positive and optimistic. And I think everybody in this room that's a donor, and I know that there's a lot of you here, deserves a big hand for stepping forward and contributing to the project.
Bruce?
Yeah, I think it was a wonderful show of force, and I think it was a tremendous outpouring of support that shows that this community, when they care about things, they'll back it up. I don't think it has anything to do with the merits of the case, whether it's a good idea or not. You know, I could argue with some of the specifics that Patrick said, but to answer specifically your question, I don't take anything away from the donors, and I don't take anything away from the people who think it's a good idea. But because some people thought it was a good idea and donated money to it, doesn't make it a good idea. I mean, I think just intellectually it just isn't the right thing to do. And it has nothing to do with the people, and Patrick and I are friends. We were friends before, we'll be friends after. This is not about people, it's about, is this a good idea? Is this the right place for it?
We have one question back here.
Excuse me, can you both address a bit more the alleged problem with maintenance costs? What, Bruce, you say it's going to be terrible. Pat, you're saying, you know, there's a plan in place. So would you address that, but also speak to the fact that public places are supported by taxpayers? Why should this be any different? I mean, all of our parks, for instance, are supported by our taxpayers. We're going to start a new trend that the only thing we can do with a public, if we're going to develop a public space, is have it self-sustaining? So please address both.
Yeah, I'll be honest that I defer to city staff on the operations estimates, and they've put them out there and they're available for anybody that wants to see them. I'm not an expert in the cost of operating and maintaining a public space, but you're exactly right. Public spaces are paid for by the taxpayers because they improve the quality of life of the area. The Capitol Theater is a perfect example. Charlie, in the back, full disclosure, I'm on the board there. We take city funds to help balance our budget, but can you imagine downtown Yakima and the arts and culture scene in downtown Yakima without the Capitol Theater? If we force the Capitol Theater to be fully self-sustaining, that'd be a tragedy.
And Bruce?
Well, the problem is that this is going to cost a lot of money to operate. The city, just on the operation, or on the maintenance part, not the operations part, the city estimate is $200,000. And as we all know, those usually turn out to be low. The operating cost is where you got to hire people and you got to program events and you hopefully got to buy advertising and things like that. And that's not even factored in. But the city's own estimate now is $200,000. They put a bid out to see if people would respond to operating it, and they got zero response. And the point is to go directly to your second question, if this community wants to accept that this is a public facility, and if the community wants to spend $200,000 to $400,000 a year maintaining it, well then that's fine, but let's be honest about it, that's what the choice is. This is not a self-funding project, which is what it's been presented as from day one. If the community wants to have that discussion and make that decision, which we're going to get the opportunity in November to do, then there it is. But let's have an honest discussion about what the real facts are.
Final question in the back.
So a couple thoughts and questions. One is proposition number 1 passed a few years ago, and it helped fund the Aquatic Center, it helped fund Sozo, and it was supposed to help fund the Plaza. So the voters already voted once, right, to have capital improvements, quality of life improvements, which both Aquatic Center, Sozo, and the Plaza falls into. Sozo is self-supporting. We're not taking city dollars on a regular basis, so the city is already getting a good deal there. But my question is that why are we taking something out to vote again when the voters have already said that they want this? And the voters are actually getting a better deal because that money from Proposition 1 was split a third, a third, a third, and now the city's getting a much better deal. So why do we take something out to the voters again when City Council and voters have already said yes once? Bruce?
Well, Kerry, with all due respect, your assumption is wrong. Proposition 1 was an effort to dedicate money to certain uses, and it was supposed to go to parks and recreation uses. It was based after a similar one that was done that dedicated money to street repairs. And the reality is it was done that way because they wanted to put it in the charter to take it out of the hands of unions so they couldn't pass it around to employees, that it would go to practical things like roads and parks and things like that. What the City Council decided to do with that money after Proposition 1 passed was primarily a large part of it went to the Aquatic Center, and a large part of it went to your project that's a wonderful project, which was the Sozo Center. It was not on the ballot at the time. It was not a discussion item at the time. The discussion item at the time was just generally to earmark money for recreational uses, and then the council later decided what to do with the money.
Thank you. Pat?
Yeah, I don't think we need a vote. I think it's unfortunate that City Council didn't have the courage to lead on this and just make a vote up or down. But we are going to have a vote. So that's where we stand today, and that's why we're all here, is to get a little more information going in this vote. My opinion is we've said no in this community for decades. Let's try saying yes. No has got us a downtown that for 20 years has been underutilized. Let's try saying yes. Let's say yes to making downtown a destination for business, art, culture, families, farmers markets, kids, and events.
Well, Pat Smith, Bruce Smith, thank you both very much for that very informative panel. Thank you for your questions as well.